Darkman is a truly odd movie. It has elements of the superhero genre and is clearly heavily inspired by superhero horror and mystery comics. But Sam Raimi's penchant for horror comedy comes out in spades, and as a result, it's hard sometimes to tell what this movie is trying to be. Darkman is a character of Sam Raimi's own creation, which he developed first as a short story and then as a film when he couldn't get the rights to make already established heroes. Before this, he had been interested in both Batman and The Shadow. So it does have a distinct comic book feel, and Raimi borrows a lot of elements from other comic book and superhero properties. But Darkman is almost the antithesis of a superhero, which makes it almost hard for me to call it a superhero movie. He has a tragic accident that transforms him, but rather than rising from the ashes and trying to make the world a better place, he becomes a monster, physically and mentally. Most superheroes feel their city needs them in some way. That even if some bad happens because of mistakes they make, it doesn't outweigh the good they do. But Darkman isn't like that. He hates what he has become, and yet he says he's learned to live with it. I get the distinct impression that the fact he can live with it is precisely what he feels makes him a monster. And I'm certainly not complaining that Darkman isn't exactly a superhero. It's something he and the Punisher have in common. I'll talk about how successful the film is at its goals, but by and large, its goals are ambitious. Effectively, Raimi is trying to give us a superhero tragedy. What if a scientist with noble aspirations had an accident that led him to develop powers of sorts, and rather than learning to find a positive use for those powers, it completely ruins a good man? He still puts on something akin to a costume, he still fights crime, he still has to save someone he cares about, and yet he not only looks like a monster, but he comes to see himself that way. Darkman is a very simple revenge story that happens to include all the trappings of a comic book movie. Peyton is a scientist who is on the verge of stabilizing a liquid skin that would allow him to replace the skin of burn victims, etc. The catch is that it only stays stable in the dark. Meanwhile, his girlfriend, Julie, stumbles on a document that would incriminate billionaire Louis Strack Jr., who has been bribing the zoning commission along with crime boss Robert Durant in order to get his city built faster. Durant sends thugs to Peyton to find the document, and they do, but they also try to kill Peyton since he's seen them. They force him down into his vat of acid. It's always got to be a vat of acid, right? I mean, they want him dead. I don't know why they can't just shoot him. And then they blow up the building. Peyton survives but is horribly disfigured, and he spends the rest of the movie trying to perfect his liquid skin, which he uses to make masks to disguise himself as his victims in order to orchestrate their demise. And he tries to get revenge on everyone involved in his disfigurement, mainly Robert Durant. The movie tries to use realistic ways of incorporating comic book ideas, and like a lot of Marvel heroes, Darkman's origin is based in science. He's found in the river on the far side of town and can't be identified, so he's taken to a hospital where his nerve endings are severed so he won't feel the pain of his burns. It's this operation that gives him his powers, not the accident itself, which is a nice twist. There's a scene where a doctor explains the pros and cons to what they have done to him. By making him immune to physical pain, his body will compensate by producing more adrenaline and experiencing more emotion. So Darkman is much more susceptible to rage and emotional breakdowns, but he also has augmented strength due to the adrenaline. So Darkman, like all superheroes, has his strengths and weaknesses. Not only does he not feel pain and has some extra strength, he has his liquid skin and can look like other people. But the skin destabilizes after 100 minutes, which is a really great device for a story. It's like a ticking time bomb. Each time Peyton creates and wears another face, we wonder if he'll be able to complete his objective before his time runs out. Sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't. What tortures Peyton is that he can return to Julie, his girlfriend, but he can never spend more than 100 minutes with her at a time. He doesn't want her to know what he's become. At first, I thought this was a typical Hunchback of Notre Dame subplot. He wants the girl, but he knows she'll never accept him because of his hideous appearance. It becomes more than that, though perhaps a little too late in the movie, where we find that Peyton isn't just worried about what he looks like, he's worried about the man he's become. At the very end of the film, he tells her, "As I worked on the mask, I realized the man inside was changing. He became wrong. A monster." This is a great theme to devote a story to, but it really doesn't come out until the last couple minutes of the movie. I spent most of the film wondering what Raimi was getting at with all this, and then the characters conveniently told me just before the credits rolled. The movie suffers from its characterization and motivation being second to action and spectacle. We've got a high concept here that lends itself to a lot of interesting or funny or creepy or disturbing situations. It's as if Raimi made a list of all the clever scenes he could create with this idea, and then he uses a simple plot to tie it all together. It isn't that nothing that happens makes sense, but the events don't feel unified. Peyton pretends to be a thug, then he kills that thug. There's gunfire, there's explosions. Repeat until inevitable climax of film. We're told what the movie is about, but I feel as if I didn't really see that unfold. Sure, we see Peyton agonize over being disfigured and not being able to go back to his old life. We see him kill those responsible for what happened to him, so we know he's going to a dark place. But I never feel like I know Peyton, like I'm feeling this with him. I don't know anything about him, besides that he's a scientist and he has a girlfriend who's a lawyer and for some reason won't commit to marrying him, even though she's completely devoted to him toward the end. There's such an emotional disconnect between protagonist and viewer that it's difficult to understand the character arc. Peyton goes insane every time he thinks someone might see him as a freak, like in a totally bizarre scene at a carnival where he wins a rigged ball throwing game because of his enhanced strength, and the guy running the game won't give him the pink elephant he's trying to win for his girlfriend. At the same time, he sees a disfigured man who's being presented as a carnival entertainment, and he goes mad, breaking the man's fingers. This is actually my least favorite scene in the movie because it's so absurd. It's a bizarre tone shift from serious piece about a broken man trying to keep his sanity to disturbing B-grade horror comedy, though I guess the opening scene kind of has that also. When Peyton bends the man's fingers back and they look rubber, it takes me right out of the film. The ideas are good, but the execution is inconsistent. There are two villains, the crime lord who disturbingly collects fingers of everyone who's ever failed him, and the evil corporate tycoon. And the movie tries to make a big reveal out of the billionaire being the one pulling all the strings, but that's fairly obvious. Perhaps it wouldn't have been if the movie hadn't shown its cards early by revealing that he and Durant have had dealings. Suddenly in the third act, we find that the billionaire Strack actually planned Peyton's murder, but it just isn't that big of a deal since we know he was crooked anyway. But I do like the reversal Strack lays on Darkman at the end, just before Darkman drops him to his death, when he says, "Who's the real monster? I destroyed to make something better, you destroy for revenge." Again, this comes way too late, and is the fundamental idea that should have been coursing throughout the film. And he does have a point. Who's to say that Darkman is the good guy here, besides the fact that his name is in the title and he takes out bad guys? Whether or not you think a superhero should ever kill, Darkman never kills someone to save another person. Even when he kills Strack, it isn't because his girlfriend is in danger. Everything he does is for revenge. In a story, your protagonist needs at least one clear opportunity for change. That's what creates a good character arc. We learn something about the character based on how he changes or whether he really does change. This is something this movie really gets right. Darkman knows he's turning into something he hates, but his rage outshines his reason. Over and over he says, "I'm a scientist," trying to keep his objectivism, but he succumbs to his anger. He has a chance to become a better man when his girlfriend accepts him, even with his disfigurement. And Strack gives him a chance to change at the construction site, when he says if Darkman drops him, he's just as bad as he is. Worse even. Now obviously he's just trying to save his own skin. Darkman has already killed several people, and killing him isn't any different. But if Darkman decided not to kill someone he wants revenge on, that could set him on a better path. Again, he ignores this chance to change, and he says he's learning to live with it. He's a monster, and he's embraced it. Liam Neeson is good in the role, but his talent is somewhat wasted because, as I said, he just isn't given enough material to work with. Durant is well cast and is sufficiently creepy, but no one else really stands out. Most of the acting seems a little flat, especially from Julie and Strack. Raimi is a master behind the camera, though. He comes up with a lot of very clever perspective shots, like putting the camera right at the manhole when Darkman kills a henchman, played by Raimi's brother, by the way, by waiting for a truck to run him over. The editing here is fast-paced, and we're seeing through the henchman's eyes, waiting for the inevitable tires that will run us over. Danny Elfman's score is a little distracting if you've seen Batman, because this was released the very next year, and it sounds suspiciously similar. The music in the climactic scene where Darkman is about to drop Strack is nearly identical to the music when Batman is about to drop the Joker. The most impressive aspect is the makeup. We go a good long time before we see Peyton's disfigured face, and I assumed it would be behind bandages the whole movie so we would wonder just what it looks like. This is risky, because once it is revealed, if it looks silly or not horrifying enough, it isn't worth the wait. But this is almost as good as the makeup job on Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight, and I especially like the teeth. It's wonderfully grotesque. And every time Peyton wears one of his masks, even when it's a mask of his own face, it looks plastic, washed out, and is missing some of the lines and contours a face would usually have. It looks fake, and that helps it to be more realistic. I really enjoyed the scene where Peyton disguises himself as Durant and they run into each other. The thugs are trying to decide which is the real one, but we can tell because the makeup is so detailed, one really does look plastic and the other looks real, even though, of course, they're both the same actor. There's a good attention to detail with the disguises, Peyton trying to mimic Durant's voice and push his stomach out to look fatter. I'm going to give Darkman a 2 out of 4. The people just aren't real enough for me to care much about them, and the gratuitous action and over-the-top violence gets in the way of the storytelling. But I like the brooding ambiance and the overall design. It has everything it needs to be a great movie, but the pieces just don't quite fit together right.